Hey everyone, welcome back to TheTopher Drives, where this morning you're joining me on my commute in this 2024 Hyundai Ioniq 5 Limited all-wheel drive. I've got to go and do some bring a trailer photography out at Vintique Motors in Livonia, Michigan, and I thought I would show you what it's like to roll out of bed, jump into your Ioniq 5, and do your daily routine. This is now the third model year for the Ioniq 5, and it's still looking as Pixar-ish as ever. In fact, now they literally offer a Disney limited edition version of this car, so maybe Hyundai watches my videos, because I've always said that this looks like it was pulled out of the Pixar universe, and you can really feed into that now with the D100 edition. I'll put a picture of that on the screen. But anyways, I love the design language of this car, and I love that it kind of breaks the mold for everything else in this segment. It's just like a silly little jelly bean crossover. Anyways, though, this thing just looks like a big hatchback, like an inflated Mark I Golf or something, but it is still a pretty good size. I've been able to back it into my garage this week, plug it in, and it still leaves room to pull out the trash bin. I'll put in a shot of that so you can see sizing wise, because it is kind of hard to tell the size of this thing on camera. This one is finished in cyber gray, and it is a limited, so it's one notch below the Disney edition, which is essentially the top trim, because the Disney edition is limited edition. So this thing comes in as spec'd about $58,000. Base price on the limited is $53,000, but that comes only two-wheel drive. This is the dual motor all-wheel drive, which means it makes 320 horsepower and 446 pound-feet of torque. It weighs about 4,600 pounds, so it ain't light, and it also kind of ain't cheap. But this thing is going to be made in Georgia starting in October, which means you'll be able to do the $7,500 tax credit in America. So when you figure that in, it kind of makes this car make a bit more sense, because when I looked at the Monroney for this, $58,000, I thought that was a little bit much, but if you got it a little bit closer down to $50,000, it does make a bit more sense. And especially when you apply that to the base Ioniq 5, which starts closer to $40,000, being in the 30s for a car like this, it's pretty dang attractive. So I'm already running late. Let's show you around this thing, and then we'll jump on the road and we'll show you what it's like to drive. Pretty good amount of room in this car as a whole. Of course, with it being electric, things sit up a little bit higher in the back because we do have a rear motor in this car. But in the actual seating compartment, we've got a ton of room, and we'll show you that once we get up front. Underneath the trunk floor, which slides out, we've got a little bit of storage. You can see we have just I think this is a level 1 charger that the car comes with. So you'll probably want to invest in some sort of a level 2 charger for your garage. This will charge overnight. Takes about 8 hours to go from 10 to 100 or whatever a normal rate would be, but I was able to get a full charge in this as I slept last night, so that is a good thing with my level 2 charger in the garage. Even more impressive, though, is when you take this thing out on a proper road trip, which I actually have done in an Ioniq 5 over on the Daily Motor channel a million years ago, but you are able to charge this thing from 10 to 80% in something ridiculous like 15 or 20 minutes from memory anyways. I was able to just kind of eat my lunch, and then the car was completely charged, so it was no inconvenience at all. See these silly door handles that pop out for you. This car has a two-tone gray interior, which is almost more like a white, because you can kind of see that contrast between the actual cyber gray paint on the car and the so-called gray interior, which means it does feel a bit sterile in here. It's very just kind of like padded room white. The only contrast you have is the dashboard is a darker gray, but everything else is this very light gray. This is the first one of these I've driven that didn't have a black interior, so I kind of like it. I mean, it brightens things up a little bit in here. I shouldn't complain about a unique interior color. We have an armrest here with some cup holders. Our vents are mounted in the B pillars, which I don't always love. I kind of prefer to have a climate control panel down here on the console, especially in an SUV that's like 60 grand. I feel like I should have something right here, but whatever. At least we have some vents. We have USB-A ports in this car still, which is a bit strange. And it's the same story up front. So if you've thrown away all of your USB-A cords, I've got bad news for you here with the Ioniq 5, because all of them are USB-A. So how's room back here? I'm 5'11", sat behind myself. I've got plenty of room, and it's a pretty open greenhouse in this car. The Limited gets you this glass roof, which doesn't really affect headroom, I don't think. And Overall ergonomics back here are pretty nice. I don't feel cramped. I feel like I could sit back here for a while and enjoy a road trip or a commute if I were to be in the backseat carpooling with some friends. We've got no drivetrain hump here in the middle, so just a flat floor in the back seat. Taking a look up front, and we'll jump up there and show you what that's all about in a second after I show you the frunk in this thing, because you do actually get a baby little frunk in the front of this Ioniq 5. There we go. We've got some fluid bottles, washer fluid top off there, some other normal sort of engine bay looking things, but in the middle we have this thing that they've tried to make look like an engine, which I think is funny, but it actually opens up and reveals a couple little storage shelves. And you can put things like your EV charger in here if you're traveling somewhere with a level 2. Store that in here, or just whatever you'd like, I suppose. It's not a ton of room, but it's nice that you have something up front for just that much more added storage. That hood closes nicely. This thing still has Hyundai badges. Hyundai hasn't deleted them off of this car yet. So we've got one on the front, we've got one on all of the wheels, and we even have one on the back. That's surprising. These things look awesome when they are lowered with wheels. I know a couple people have done it, and they look fantastic. Okay, let's jump in. Let's hit the road. And we'll show you what it's like to commute. We'll talk about what it's like to live with this Ioniq 5 on this morning's drive. Okay. We have a comfort access driver's seat. You can see that moved me a little bit closer to the steering wheel when I got in. This does have a push to start. We don't just get in and have the car begin like some other EVs do. And adding to that sterile theme in here, the default mode for the cluster and infotainment is a white screen. So not only are the door panels, the cluster surround, the seats, everything white, so are the gauges. Luckily, you can change this if you want them to be black, or you can put them in auto. They'll run white during the day, and then when the headlights come on, they switch to black. I think we'll run them in white today just to give you guys the full Ioniq 5 experience, but that is that. Hyundai claims a 260-mile range for this car, but with a 96% charge, the cluster is showing a 288-mile range. So I'm not sure which is accurate. We have a 77.4 kilowatt-hour battery in this car. I've been doing 3.3 miles per kilowatt-hour so far. We have Apple CarPlay, of course, but it still isn't wireless. And this is mostly annoying because the port for it is on the floor, very far away from you. Now, I'm not saying that you should be on your phone while you're driving, but say you pull into a parking lot or something and you're hanging out in the car, you have to reach down to grab your phone out of the, what I assume is the designated little phone cubby. This car is kind of like a teacher in the way that it takes your phone from you while you're driving. Again, not always a bad thing, but that is down there. So wireless CarPlay would be nice to see in these cars, and I hope that they have a plan to kind of integrate that into all of their models here, especially some of the more expensive stuff like this. We also have a little 12-volt plug down here. And, well, the architecture up here is actually similar to the way that it is in the back seat. And you could actually give yourself more room because this entire center console slides back and forth. So you can move this entire unit back and forth, which I suppose it's a different way to just move the top bit. But the only thing this does is it makes it easy for you to switch seats with the passenger, like so. You can just jump over to the passenger seat, or it makes it easy for the passenger to operate the pedals, as you can see. So very open greenhouse here in the front of the car as well. Passenger seat is pretty nice. Usually I don't find my way over here. Let's get back into the driver's seat. I feel weird. Very seamless transition though, as you can see. This has a very much open console layout, but that is nice in this car because they give you some grippy material. So if you're bringing some things with you to the office, like I am today, very important materials, they shouldn't slide around in the console, or if you set them down here in this little open tray. All right, we still have a physical climate control panel in this car. I feel like you guys probably know this car so well by now. I don't need to give you like the full complete walk around. So I'm going to stick my destination here in the nav, and then we'll hit the road, show you what this thing's like to drive. I'm sure you all know by now there is an N version of the Ioniq 5 that is already out for the 2025 model year. I have not driven that yet. I'm kind of glad I haven't because I'm kind of able to give you a bit more of an organic experience here in this regular Ioniq 5 Limited. And I want to start out by saying that even though this thing does look very enthusiast-like from the outside, the non-N version of this car does not really drive like an enthusiast car. The most enthusiastic thing you can do with this is you can disable the traction and stability control completely, which Hyundai and Kia usually always give you that option. So that is nice to see in something like this because other competitors in the segment do not let you do that. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Let's talk about some first impressions here as you get on the road. The first thing you notice is this pretty typical Hyundai ultralight steering. This does weight up a bit more when you're in sport mode. Doesn't give you any more feel, but it does make the steering a little bit heavier. Additionally, this is of course an electric vehicle, which means you can one pedal drive it, but you have to pull the left paddle every time you get in to activate what Hyundai calls I-pedal, which is your one pedal driving mode. You've got 4 different levels of regen, the 4th one being full I-pedal, and you can adjust those with the steering wheel mounted paddle shifters. Which means you can come into a corner with no regen. You can kind of apply it slowly if that's your thing. Generally, I get into this car and the first thing I do is I pull that left paddle because personally, I just prefer to drive EVs with one pedal driving. It's how I've always done it. It's how I feel the most comfortable. So with you having to do that every time, it's a little bit frustrating, but it's kind of like a first world problems thing. You'll get over it. Pull the paddle when you get in. And this thing has some serious power. I'm sure my opinion on that will change once I drive the N, but you've got nice progressive throttle response here and throttle tuning when you're in normal mode. You can hit this drive mode button here on the steering wheel, located kind of like a Porsche, which I think is funny. And you can put this thing into sport mode. And like I said earlier, it weights up the steering, but it also puts the throttle response in instantaneous mode. So you can straighten out here and hit the throttle. And it'll keep pulling as well up into highway speeds. And brake pedal feel here is pretty good too. Some of these EVs have a very spongy brake pedal, but this one feels quite all right. Apologies for the nav. We're doing a little bit of a circuit before we jump on the highway. Really nice progressive regen when you're at highway speeds as well. All of the inputs in here feel pretty natural. Is this a driver's car? No, which I'm about to show you. Let's turn everything off. You just hold the traction control button. You can do this while you're on the move, and it disables everything. All right, we'll come into this pretty sharp corner. Not a ton of feel from the steering, but it'll boogie still, and the rear motor in this car does make a little bit more power than the front. However, I don't feel really a rear bias in this car, and I think that has to do with just kind of the programming of how these electric motors are set to deliver power, because it does feel a bit front wheel drive bias. Right, we'll turn this back on so we can use our cruise control and such other devices. But not every car has to drive like an enthusiast car, and I don't even think that that takes away from the fun to drive factor of this Ioniq 5, because it's fun to kind of negotiate this car around normal driving settings, around city situations. Not everything needs to be visceral is what I'm trying to say. So I still think that this car drives as it should. I love when EVs have a mode where you can put them into the instant throttle response sort of setting, and they just absolutely pin your head to the back of the to the headrest. Very good. We also have an eco drive mode. In my opinion, that makes things a little bit too numb. These drive modes are very accurate though. Eco is super numb. Sport is super twitchy in the way that I wouldn't really drive in sport if I was around town, because it makes the throttle response way too touchy. But normal mode is calibrated so nicely. They've done a pretty dang good job there. That is a 2025 Toyota Camry. That's the first one of those I've seen in the wild. Check it out. Nice. All right, we're gonna get merged onto the highway here. We'll talk about some highway manners in this Ioniq 5. Use some of this power, get ahead of the semi. I really do love that this car doesn't really taper off its power like some EVs. It still pulls strong when you are merging. Now, at the end of the day, this is still a Hyundai, which means we have a ton of driver aids in this car that make it so you really don't have to do much once you're on the highway. Activating it is as simple as pressing the cruise control button on the right-hand button segment on the steering wheel here. And I must have this set in the furthest distance. I do. This has adaptive cruise control. It's got steering assist. It's got lane keep assist. It has lane change assist. It has all of the things that you would expect to see from a modern day Hyundai. We'll try out this lane change assist really quick. I've never liked this system, and it's the one sort of portion of these driver aids in Hyundais that I don't like. And the reason being, you have to have your hands on the steering wheel if you want it to initiate a lane change. And at that point, if I have to put that effort in, why wouldn't I just put the effort in to slightly move my hands to make the lane change? It's just a little bit silly. Otherwise, though, this thing does a great job keeping you in the lane. Here we go. Nope, yep, and it canceled the lane change because I gave it too much effort. Okay, so this lane change system still doesn't really feel up to modern times. And it's worth mentioning that overall calibration and programming of this lane keep assist and steering assist is pretty top-notch. It makes it a little bit less impressive when you think that you can have this same sort of system in an Elantra or even in like a Kia Rio, but I don't know, it doesn't take away from the fact that it is still a really good, nice to use system. So what's it like to actually sit in this car? Once you're settled in, you've got your steering assist going and everything. It's pretty nice. Like I said earlier in the video, super open greenhouse, very airy feeling in this car, even though I do feel like I'm wearing a lab coat while I'm driving it. Center console squishiness, not the best. It's pretty firm, and also it kind of jiggles about a bit more than I would like. I'd like it to feel a little bit more in place. But I think with the dynamic range of this entire center console, things are going to move a bit more than you may be used to. On the left side, it kind of a similar story, and you guys can hear that from me knocking on there. So elbow comfiness, not the best in the world here with the Ioniq 5. So let's talk about NVH. We'll let you observe it for a second before I give my thoughts. I'm really only hearing wind noise. I think these Michelin tires on this car are unique EV tires, so they are engineered to be quiet. We have a few buttons here. We do still have a volume knob, which is nice. We have got this programmable star button, which I always program to bring up phone projection. The cluster design changes depending on what drive mode you're in. Actually, that reminds me. Something I like about this car is, even though it has the sort of Pixar-ish outward appearance, which is very striking, it makes people stare at the car and wonder what the heck it is, because these weren't even sold in Michigan up until, I think, either this year or last year. I'm distracting myself again. What I like about this car is it isn't really gimmicky in the way that its sister vehicles, the Kia EV6 and Genesis GV60 are, because you don't really have any EV driving noises in this car. It just kind of does its own thing and gives you just very natural, organic EV noises. We're gonna go sport for the cloverleaf, giving this Traverse enough room. A little bit of lift-off oversteer, and these Michelins, yeah, they're quiet when you're cruising, but they complain when you're going around corners like this. So we have a Bose sound system in this car. Hyundai is still kind of inconsistent, Hyundai, Kia, Genesis, with like what sound system they're actually putting in the car. Some of them have Harman Kardon, some of them have Bose, some of them have Lexicon, some of them have Bang & Olufsen. It's kind of just the luck of the draw, but this Ioniq 5 has a Bose system. It's pretty decent. It's definitely not the best Bose system in the world, in the same way that it isn't the best system fitted to a Hyundai. I think for 60 grand, you could maybe long for a little bit more from this car, but we'll play a song here and you guys can see what you think of this system. Before I forget, we have a camera rearview mirror in this car too, which honestly isn't really necessary because the visibility in this car, like the open greenhouse, is pretty freaking nice. Good visibility out of the mirrors, great visibility out of the back, especially if you fold those headrests, which actually you might not be able to, so maybe you do want the camera. But you have it if you want it. If you don't want it, it's still a really nice usable rearview mirror. So that's got to come through on camera. It's just kind of a dull system. It has enough power. You can turn the bass up a bit and get some more of those distinct punches, but I wish it just had a little bit more complexity. And I know Bose is capable. I've heard some really dang good Bose systems. And for 60 grand, I would expect to see maybe a little bit more performance, especially considering when the Harman Kardon system in something like a Volvo that's quite comparable. The Volvo XC40 Recharge I was driving last week had a much better sound system, and it was about the same price and about the same size as this car. The best thing about these driver aids are actually commute related too, because I'm one of those people that kind of takes my breakfast on the road with me because I'm always kind of nauseous when I wake up and I can't eat super early in the morning. So you can use the steering assist, and actually you can go one step further. You can turn on the lane keep if you hold the steering wheel button. And the car can steer for you while you take a sip of your water, or if you want to get your granola bar out, start eating your breakfast, the car is still driving for you. You know? It's perfect for, even if you're dropping chocolate chips on yourself, perfect for this sort of thing. What's the driver's compartment like in the leg department? Well, I'm 5'11", and I'm in a relaxed mode here in the Ioniq 5. Obviously, to my right, there's nothing. I could just put my leg over in the passenger compartment while I'm driving. Gives you some options if you have a tight right leg to just completely stretch that out. The left leg, ow. Ooh, but you will smash it on the climate control when you bring it back, so maybe don't do that. Ow. Ow. Okay, the left-hand side, hard surface. Even more notably, if you're a bit shorter than me, even if by 2 inches, if you're 5'8", you might be bumping your memory seat switches with your left knee, which means if your driver one is much taller or shorter than you, could be a little bit of a hazard for you there. I think my biggest takeaway from this car and what I love so much about it is, from the outside, it does look like quite an enthusiast package. It's uniquely styled. It really just looks like a big inflated Mark I Volkswagen Golf or Lancia Delta Integrale, whatever people are saying this week about it. But when you get into it, all of that kind of goes away. And that's good for other people, because it means that cars like this can start to be present on the motorways, and you have more fun things to look at while you're driving your car that you actually want to engage with, or while you're driving your car that you don't. I mean, I really like driving this on a commuting basis, and I thought that this would be an appropriate video for this car because this is the sort of thing that this car is going to be doing. This is a good thing overall for, I think, the EV market as a whole. If companies will start going in this direction with their cars, Hyundai's going a step further, obviously, with the Ioniq 5N, and they are actually attempting to make a fully enthusiast-based electric vehicle with simulated gear changes and ICE engine noises and everything. And it's even more bonkers to look at on the outside, which I absolutely love. I think Hyundai's doing this sort of thing right. The Ioniq 5 and the Ioniq 6, very good EVs, and also pretty attainable for decent prices. There was a lease deal on the Ioniq 6 for a while, a few months ago, where you could have it with zero down for like $300-400 a month, which is not bad at all when you consider that these cars sticker most of the time in limited trim form for $50,000 to $60,000. So these cars are not cheap, but they will become cheap later this year when you are able to get that $7,500 tax credit, which is really exciting. Have these things built in the good old US of A, brother, God bless. This is one of those cars too that it's just really low stress. Everything's very easy, straightforward. That goes as far as actually driving this thing and working everything on the interior. We have time actually for me to fit in one more complaint here about this Ioniq 5, and that is the vent placement. A lot of cars nowadays, and I think it's because of the infotainment screens, they're kind of prioritizing infotainment over vents. I generally like to be climate controlled when I'm in cars, so vent placement is pretty important to me. And I don't love the placement here in the Ioniq 5, primarily the one to the left of the steering wheel, because it does quite literally just point at the steering wheel because it's so far to the right-hand side. The ones in the middle, they're okay. You can pretty accurately aim them. I don't know. I don't know if I want to give them that much praise. They could be better. I think with the overall design of this car, they could maybe extend them down slightly, or they could move them up slightly and move the infotainment up. I don't know what needs to happen, but the vent placement isn't great. It begs the question though, if you are just commuting in this car, do you need the Ioniq 5, or can you go for the more efficient and more egg-shaped Ioniq 6? I think you could, and what you should take from this video is either one is a good choice, and don't worry about the Ioniq 6 not driving as nicely as the 5, because it definitely does. Dynamically, it's actually pretty similar. So it's more so just kind of picking which size works for you. Kind of like a Volvo. You just pick, I want Volvo, and then you pick what size you want. Similar story here with the Ioniq. But I think they both look excellent, and the Ioniq 5, of course, is a bit more usable. So if you do have a family, if you're doing things other than just commuting, you're using this car on the weekend to go camping or whatever, you've got the ground clearance with this car, and it's a good thing. You know, this car hasn't gotten stale either, like some of the EVs have. Like the Mustang Mach-E does kind of feel like it's 16 years old at this point. This car does still feel brand new. So they've done a good job keeping it modern. It's aged well so far on its in its 3 years in the market. Beautifully calibrated one pedal drive. You can kind of pair your brain with this one pedal drive, and you never have to touch the brake. I mean, I've maybe touched the brake like 2 times this week driving this car. Really quiet, really relaxing, and overall a nice experience here on today's little morning commute. Got an E-Type out front, all the proper stuff today. Cool, guys. All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for our little morning commute with this Hyundai Ioniq 5. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions about this thing. I'm going to be living with this for the remainder of the week. Oh, baby. I love cars. I like to think my dynamic range as an enthusiast knows no bounds. Love a Land Yacht Cadillac. Love an Ioniq 5. What can I say? Cool. Hit our little button on the end of the shifter. Parking brake automatically applies if you want to take it off. It's right here to the left of the steering wheel. We'll shut this thing off. We'll give you one last look at it. That'll wrap it up for us today. Almost feels like it fits in here among all of the other enthusiast cars. All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up for us today. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.